All right. So, most of the stuff you're gonna answer is the same as he was answering, and then you'll have your own stories as well, I'm sure.
Okay.
But just how do you remember Grandpa or your father coming to America and the story behind?
Well, I don't remember him coming here because I wasn't born then, but that's okay. All I remember is we lived in a nice neighborhood because it was on Cleveland Avenue. I was born, when I was born is when they moved to Cleveland Avenue, 1928. So I don't remember too much then, but I know in the 30s, as I was growing up, I thought it was a very nice neighborhood because when you go south of North Avenue, we were just north of North Avenue. You know, yeah, south of North Avenue was a completely different neighborhood. You know, it was mostly Italian and some blacks moving in, but it was mostly Italian, and it was different because they spoke Italian a lot and everything else. We didn't. We spoke English. We went to a nice school. LaSalle National. LaSalle was the school at the time, you know, where I went, the grammar school, and then went to St. Michael's High School, which was right just a few blocks from our house, which was very good high school, you know. So
what do you know about Grandpa coming over?
That was in the 40s, so that's all I know is that I was, like I said, I was in high school when he moved to Cleveland, to Diversity from Cleveland, and he wanted to move there by the you know, where he made the restaurant. He started out with a bar, and because the war was on, and he wanted to put some food in there, and he put pizza in there, which worked out beautifully, you know. So he moved upstairs. People moved out. He moved in, bought the building, and I was still going to St. Michael's High School. We moved to Diversity, and I had to take a bus and a train, streetcar all the way down back to the old neighborhood. And it took me an hour to get to school every day and get it back home, you know. It wasn't too good. So then in my, that was in my second year of high school. So third year then, I went to Steinmetz, which was very close. I could walk to school, you know. It was not too far away. And that was nice. We weren't in the district, we were right across the street because we were east of Central Avenue, and west of Central Avenue was for Steinmetz. East was Foreman High School. But everybody I knew out there was going to Steinmetz. It was a brand new high school. It was built in '36, you know, and it was beautiful. It had a beautiful grounds and everything. It was really a nice high school. So I enjoyed it. The only trouble was, there was no trouble really. As soon as I came home, I went to work because I was, you know, 14 or 15 years old. And I made pizzas instantly because he was busy. It was during the war. You know, it was really busy because people were coming in, they were hungry, they want to eat. So I had to work, I had no choice, you know. And I enjoyed it though. It was something to do. We were a young kid, you know, and you're doing something. Sure. And my father was so gracious, he gave me $5 a day. You know, that was great. I thought, boy, I'm rich. Everybody was working, we couldn't get a job before that. They didn't have money, you know. And all of a sudden, you know, things are going, you know, because of the war, really. So it was nice.
What do you, as far as Grandpa coming from Italy to America and fighting in the war, what do you know?
Well, I didn't know too much. All I knew was that he had his old uniform there and all his stuff from the, you know, from the war. But he never talked too much about it or what happened. He was sick, he got gassed, and he was in the hospital. We had a picture of him being in the hospital when he was gassed, you know, because they used gas at the time and it was bad. Then they stopped it, you know. But he was all right. He liked it. He wanted to be an American. He didn't want to be anything else. He became a corporal. You know, he did good because he went to high school here, you know, United States. So.
What kind of jobs did he have when he first came?
He didn't have any jobs. He came here, he was a young man, you know, a young teenager, you know. So he really didn't, he had to learn how to speak the language first to get a job, you know. But he didn't join, he was drafted into the Army. And that was good for him. He thought, that, gee, now he can become an American because he's in the Army, U.S. Army, you know. That was good. That was just good for him. He thought it was good.
What kind of work did he do after the Army?
Well, then he had several different jobs. You know, he worked for the insurance company, and he worked for Judge and Dolph, which is a liquor company. That's the worst. They owned Blackhawks, you know. And he was selling liquor, and he was selling up in the northwest side of Chicago. And he met Riga, who has the grocery store up there on Diversity and Central. And the store next to him was empty. And Riga told him, he says, why don't you just open a liquor store? There's no liquor stores. You know, here you're selling liquor, and you can't sell any around here because there's very few liquor stores, you know, very few bars even. It was all vacant land out there. You know, it was northwest of Chicago. You know, Central Avenue actually was the end of the bus line for Craig. It would only go up to there and go back, you know, and that's where he was at. So he said, that sounds like a good idea. So that's what he did. He started a bar, he had a liquor store, and put a little bar in it. But wow, all of a sudden the war came, and everybody was, you know, working, and they wanted to, you know, spend their money somewhere. And they'd go to the bar and have a few drinks. And then they wanted to eat. Naturally, you got to eat, right? So I don't know where he got the idea, but he says pizza sounds like the right thing to serve at the bar because it's easy. And it was easy, you know, and that's how he started.
Did you know of anybody else doing pizza when?
Not out there, no. I didn't know. All I know is we always had it at home. You know, my mother would make it for lunch or that when we come home from school, but I didn't know of any restaurant that was making pizza. Or any place. There might have been one or two in the city early, you know, way up there in downtown area, but we didn't know any. But it would work for him. He started making pizza, and boy, they couldn't get enough, you know. So I was stuck making them. That's okay. I didn't mind. I got $5. That wasn't too bad.
So I didn't know the story of the Wirtz. Go over the liquor store and the Wirtz family.
Yeah, well, he worked for Judge and Dolph. That's the liquor company.
Uh-huh.
You know, they sell all kinds of liquor, and that's it. And that was Judge and Dolph was owned by the Wirtz family, who owned the Blackhawks. You know, which was very nice. You know, so I didn't know that at the time. I was a young kid.
Sure.
You know.
So that brokered him getting to a liquor store.
Yeah, but he didn't want to have anything to do with the other guys, the Sicilians that were in the mafia that were where his old neighborhood was. He knew a lot of them there because they were in those gangs, you know, and it was no good really, and he didn't like it. He didn't want to have anything to do with them, you know. So he opened up his own place, and that's it. And he just added beef sandwiches and shrimp and chili, and that's it, just so that he can keep feeding these guys. And they kept coming in, and the bar was too small, and all of a sudden he had to have a bigger bar, you know. And the liquor store was getting smaller, you know, because he was doing better and the bar than he was in the liquor business. See? And that's what happened, you know.
Kind of a natural progression.
Yeah, it just, so it was all right with me. I didn't care, you know. So when the beauty parlor next door to him was a beauty parlor. When they moved out, he expanded the store and put dining room in that area where the beauty parlor was. And we got more business in. Then we had real tables and that where we could feed people, you know. And now people were coming in to eat, not just pizza, anything, you know, anything we had, you know. It was beautiful. But it was the pizza that brought them in, no question about it. They all wanted pizza. And we'd do whatever they wanted, make any kind of pizza they wanted. It was, you know, no problem at all, you know. It's amazing how popular it became. And this is in the 40s, you know.
Explain the pizza, making the pizzas in the windows and.
Yeah, well, that's where he started, in the window, because, you know, this we wanted people to see what we were doing. And he had a little kitchen in the window, a little oven, and we'd make it right there, and they could see what we're doing and how we make it. And people would look in and see it, and that would bring them in, because they wanted to see what it tastes like, you know.
Sure.
But there wasn't many people out there at that time. That was just the edge of Chicago, really. You know, it was that close, and there was a lot of vacant lots. But now that the war, especially when the war was over, they started building. Oh, they built all around there, and that was what really made it. You know, the building business went way up, and the people naturally have a larger population in the area.
Is that what ultimately led to the expansion?
Yeah, sure. Oh, definitely.
And to the back, the banquets, or
as the business kept increasing, you know, he had to get more space. He didn't have enough room, you know, and he bought the lots next door so they could park their cars. They couldn't. And now people were having cars all of a sudden. You know, after the war, they started building cars again. You know, and he needed a parking lot. Can't only 2 or 3 cars on the street in front of you. You know, that's not enough. See? So there was 3 lots, vacant lots right next to him. He bought them. Yeah. We had a nice parking lot. People would come and it would be no problem.
When did the expansion of the back start?
Oh, that started in the 50s. Now,
Can you say in the 1950s?
yeah, I was going to college at the time. I went 2 years to Rice College. Then I went 1 year to Roosevelt down, Roosevelt College. I was a pre-med student. And then my father had a heart attack. And I had to quit college for a while to go and work in a restaurant because he couldn't do much. And that was bad for me. As soon as I dropped out of college, I got drafted because the Korean War started in June of 1950. And if I was in college, they wouldn't draft me. I got my draft notice the next month. I had a draft notice during the Second World War, but I was too young. I was only 17, see. But now, I was over 17. I was 20, 22. So I had to go. That was it. I was one of the first ones drafted. November, I was in the Army in 1950. That was it, And that's okay, though. It was too bad. I took my basic training, and I was in Ohio. It was a National Guard unit from Ohio. They were engineers. They used to build pipelines, And I got in that outfit as an assistant, as a medic, Because as soon as they found out I had pre-med, boy, they said, we need a medic. And I became a medic, just like that. And I didn't have any training as a medic, but that's what I became. And I worked in the Fort Leonard Wood Hospital there, and they sent me right to the hospital to get training. I was working in the operating room. I had no knowledge of what to do or how to do it, and they taught me right there, right on the spot, And I was a surgical nurse in the operating room. And then they wanted to make me a scrub nurse, where you actually work in the. That was, girls go to school for, 2-3 years to get to do that. And I was doing it overnight. There were so many casualties, in basic training. It's unbelievable,
Wow.
The only trouble is, and the doctor in my unit, in the engineers unit, he says, don't pull a fast one on me, you're coming with us when we go. So sure enough, we went out, and the doctor in the hospital wanted me to stay, and I had to go with him. That's okay, though. The only trouble is, it switched from a pipeline unit. They made them an aviation engineer unit so that they can build runways for the Air Force. The Air Force don't have any engineers, So they call us SCARWAF, SCARWAF, Special Category of the Army, assigned to the Air Force. So now I'm an Army guy, but I'm in the Air Force. It's unbelievable, right? Went to Texas, to Walters Air Force Base. It wasn't an air base, really. It was just a base to train the guys to build runways, that's all. But we're right next door in an airfield, Carswell Air Force Base. So there wasn't much for me to do. I just go out in the field with the guys when they're building the runways to see how to build them and things like that. And I asked the doctor in our outfit, I said, I'm not learning anything. I'm just sitting in the truck picking up these guys when they get hurt. And he says, you want to go to the hospital here in Carswell Air Force Base? They got a nice hospital. I says, fine. That's why I worked in the hospital. That was okay. Sure. Wasn't too bad. In fact, it was very good. I worked in surgery and in lab technician, And who do you think comes in one day to get a serology, to get a blood test? George Spataro. I said, that's my brother, George. But it wasn't my brother, it was my cousin. It was unbelievable. He was in the Air Force, and he came in from Alaska. He was stationed up in Alaska, and he was then sent back to the United States for some reason. But anybody that came in the hospital, they had to get a blood test. But that was okay. I had a good time there. They went to their basic training at the Fort Brooks Hospital in San Antonio, Texas, to get more training. It was fine. I worked at the hospital in Brooks, but my outfit was still up in Walters Air Force Base, He came down to visit me down there, my brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Mm-hmm. Wasn't that nice?
Yeah.
I've been involved in the restaurant.
Well, first I was in the Army when this started, anyhow, about the restaurant. Because I got a furlough And I went up, and this was in '51. I got a furlough and I went back home, on my furlough. And they were remodeling the restaurant. They were building the back, the kitchen for the back. They tore down the garage we have in the back and all. And my father had an idea. He says, we're selling so much food, we have to have more space for more customers, I mean, he was really thoughtful. He wanted to do it. He wanted to do it right. So it cost a lot of money. He bought all the equipment and that to tear down the back and build a new restaurant, all stainless steel kitchen, beautiful. I mean, he did a beautiful job. And when I came back, I couldn't believe it. What was going on in the restaurant? From the little place we had up in front. But he that's what he wanted. See, so when I went back to Texas, that time my brother George, he had re-enlisted into the Air Force. He wanted to be a pilot so bad. He went to jet school in Arizona, and he was going to be graduating pretty soon. So he told me, he says, if you want, you're not too far away, because I had my card in. When I went home on furlough, I had a Bel Air Chevy that I bought just before I was drafted. It was a brand new Chevy. I never used it, So I might as well take that back with me, right? I might as well use my car. But I also had a motorcycle. I had bought a brand new motorcycle early in 50s, a Harley Davidson, the Hydra Glide, one of the best ones they ever made, at that time. And I said, oh man, now what am I going to do with my motorcycle? The builder saw it, and he said he wanted that motorcycle. He says, I won't buy it. I says, I just bought it. It's only a few months old, And I paid $800 for it. He gave me $750. I said, that's okay. $50 was good. The only trouble is the next day he brought it back. His wife kicked him out. She didn't want to have a motorcycle. So I said, oh, that's terrible, So he gave me what he paid for it plus $50. I gained $50, and I got my motorcycle back, right? I said, that's okay. I towed it back. I put a one-way trailer on the back and towed it back to Texas. I had my nice new car and a motorcycle. How do you like that? It wasn't too bad. But anyhow, my brother was graduating from jet school, and my mother and father came down to see him. They took a train down to Arizona because we had relatives there, and they stayed there with them. And I drove from Texas, and it was a great ceremony when he graduated. The planes flying, and it was the first time they ever had jet pilots. They never were in a battle before. That was the 50s. And my mother was excited. She was worried. She said, he's going to go to Korea and fly, one of those planes. What you going to do? Nothing. You can't do anything. That's it. That's what he wanted. He liked to fly, and that was it. I mean, the restaurant was nice, but that wasn't his business. He liked to fly. So eventually I got out after 2 years. I never went to Korea. I stayed there in the hospital all the time. And all they were doing was building runways. They will build one in Texas, and the 82nd Airborne was supposed to jump on it, and they all got hurt because the wind was too heavy, and they went off course with the parachutes, and they were landing in the trees. And we had so many casualties. It was unbelievable.
So how was it coming back from that working?
Well, then that was it. Now when I came back, then my father got sick again. See. He was really sick. He was, he had a heart attack before. Now he was sick again. He couldn't do much. So my sister and I had to take over. My brother was young. He was just going to get drafted then. He was just in, what were you, 17, 18?
Yeah, 19.
19, And so it was up to my sister and me to take over the business, She was 5 years older than me, And she really didn't care for the restaurant business, but she was smart. She always was tops in her class in school and all that. She was no dummy. She knew what to do. She really did. So she helped me a lot because, let's face it, here I was in the Army for 2 years, didn't work in the restaurant at all. And all of a sudden, I'm in charge of this big restaurant with a big kitchen in the back, a half a dozen cooks cooking, and a couple of bartenders, 2 or 3 bartenders, and a dozen waitresses, just like that. It was too much almost, really, at the beginning. I said, holy smokes, I got to learn fast. But that was it, But that's okay, we did it, The business was good.
What was some of the roles you had to do when you came back?
I was in charge. I had every role. There was no role I had. I had all the roles. You name it. You know, whether it was in the kitchen or in the front, walking in, taking care of it, buying, selling, taking care of the payroll. Yeah, it was a big payroll. We didn't have computers to do the payroll. We had to do it by hand. You know, put in all the hours and how long they worked and what they get. It was a lot of work. You know, but it was worth it. You know, like I said, my sister, she was a big help. You know. So, and he was gone. Gabe he's working all over the place. And where were you at? Before you went to Korea?
Well, I went to Loyola.
Right. Talk about my father now. See, he's like I say, he was still in charge, even though he didn't work as much as he used to, you know, because he was ill. But he got a hold of this guy, Frank Palumbo, who was a chef on the ocean liners coming here from Italy, you know. And he jumped ship, and he's a chef. He was trained in France. And he knew how to cook. He was a chef. He was a real chef. So somehow my father got a hold of him and got him to work at our restaurant. That changed everything. He made menus that you wouldn't believe. The food that he put on there, and when he was working in the kitchen, it was unbelievable what he could do. You know, he really changed the whole item of our restaurant. Instead of just being pizza and beef sandwiches and all that, and spaghetti and meatballs, he made a menu that you wouldn't believe. It's all the fancy food that they eat in Europe, he could make it, you know. And people came and they couldn't believe it. And all of a sudden we had this nice big restaurant, big dining room, 2 big dining rooms. It was great, you know. They could have a good meal and they could still have pizza, because we always made pizza. And our pizzas was always the best in town, you know. And he really made the change, that chef.
What year was that? What was
that? Was in the 50s, 52, 53, you know, right after I got out of service. I got out in 52, see. And as it was getting better, the business was getting better, we just kept expanding. I made a banquet hall upstairs, you know. There was 2 apartments upstairs. We used to live up there. We tore out the walls and made a nice banquet hall. We could have weddings and that and parties. And it just increased our business, is all it did. You know, we had the big parking lot next door, bought some more lots next door, and we had a nice big parking lot now, you know, because the people were coming. We were busy, and they liked our pizza, you know.
Do you know the story behind pizza and how?
We weren't the only ones doing it, you know. After my father started making pizzas, they just started popping up all over the city, you know, gradually, because the word gets around, you know, that it's a good item, you know, it's a quick item and it's easy to make. Anybody can make it, you know. Make a pizza is easy, you know. And in fact, like I say, my father was really the king at the beginning. We couldn't keep up with making the pizzas in the old ovens, because they'd cool down after you put too many pizzas in there, and you'd have to wait until they warm up to cook the pizzas. He found out about a friend called Foles Ovens, and they have a revolving oven, and it goes around in circles. You put the pizzas in there, and that oven keeps its temperature constantly, no matter what you're doing it. How many pizzas you put in there? You can put 2 dozen pizzas in there, and it keeps its temperature, you know. And we could keep up with the business that way, and that was perfect. That's what they used in the army. They had the revolving ovens to cook for all the soldiers, you know, because they don't lose your temperature. See? That's how they cook all the bread now, in revolving ovens, you know.
And this is back in the 50s?
This was in the 50s. No pizza place had a revolving oven. You know, now a lot of them do, because it's the best. There's no question. There's one I saw it on TV yesterday. They was making pizzas in the revolving oven. I thought about it. I said, gee, that was us a long time ago.